The Scarlet Pact. Prologue. 2 years ago, my world changed in the blink of an eye. It was a night I'll never forget. It was close to midnight, the entire house quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. I had just fallen asleep when a loud bang from downstairs jolted me awake. My heart raced, and I immediately felt the familiar pull of fear tighten in my chest. Slowly, I crept to my bedroom door, cracking it open to listen. Silence. But I knew something was wrong. With trembling hands, I made my way down the dark hallway and into my little brother Elijah's room. When I entered, I found him huddled in the corner, shaking with fear. "Sure, it's going to be okay," I whispered, trying to reassure him, even though I wasn't sure if it would be. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly as his small frame trembled against mine. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, even though it was only minutes. Then the second bang hit, louder this time, coming from his bedroom door. My heart sank. "Get under the bed, Eli," I whispered urgently. He refused at first, clutching onto me, but eventually I convinced him. He crawled under the bed, and I prayed that he would stay hidden. The door burst open, and there, standing in the doorway, was a man with long jet-black hair and eyes like burning embers, scarlet and cruel. He was otherworldly, something out of a nightmare. I should have run, screamed for help, but I couldn't. My body froze, paralyzed by fear. The intruder approached with silent, predatory grace. Then in one swift motion, he bit me. The pain was indescribable, scorching through my veins like fire. I couldn't focus on anything else but the searing agony. When I finally woke days later, everything had changed. My world, my body, my desires, they weren't the same. The thirst hit me first. A thirst so deep and relentless I knew nothing would quench it. Nothing except blood. Chapter 1. The alarm blared its usual screech, but today I barely noticed. My mind was already awake, reliving the nightmare I had buried 2 years ago. Sighing, I kicked off my covers and swung my legs over the edge of the bed, my body aching from the restless night. "Morning, sis," Elijah said, leaning against the doorframe of my room as he did every morning. He was taller now, a reminder of how much time had passed since that night. "Morning," I mumbled. "Get out. I need to get dressed." He rolled his eyes. "Fine. Meet you downstairs." Once he was gone, I moved to the closet, pulling out my favorite pair of black ripped jeans and a faded band t-shirt. I slipped them on, trying not to think too much about the day ahead. Grabbing my straightener, I went through the routine of fixing my hair, my thoughts elsewhere, thinking about the life I lived before that bite. Downstairs, Elijah had already prepared breakfast. 2 mugs sat on the table. One filled with regular coffee for him and the other filled with, well, something a little more necessary for me. "You're the best," I said, taking the mug and sipping it down. The thick, metallic taste filled my mouth, easing the dull ache in my throat. "I know," Elijah replied with a grin, "but you owe me for making your special drink again." Before I could respond, the door swung open, and there she was, Sierra. My best friend, the person who knew everything about me. Well, almost everything. "You guys ready for another soul-crushing day of school?" Sierra asked, tossing her bag onto the floor as she joined us. "Always," I replied dryly, wiping the remnants of blood from my lips before she noticed. Sierra had been by my side for as long as I could remember. She didn't know about my vampiric transformation, but she knew enough to sense that I had changed. She never pushed for answers, though. That's why I loved her. She was always just there. "You ready?" Elijah asked. He was more than just my little brother now. He was my anchor, my protector, even though I was the older one. He never hesitated to cover for me when things got complicated. "Let's go before we're late," I said, grabbing my bag and heading out the door with them. The walk to school was as uneventful as ever. Sierra talked about her crushes and some new band she discovered. Elijah trailed behind us, listening quietly, lost in his own world. But my mind wandered elsewhere, to the growing darkness in the city, the strange occurrences that had started happening more frequently. Missing people, unexplained deaths. Something was stirring. When we reached the school gates, something was different. I could feel it in the air. A tension, an unfamiliar energy that made my skin prickle. Sierra seemed oblivious, but I wasn't. I'd become sensitive to things like this over the last 2 years. "Hey, did you hear we're getting a new student today?" Sierra asked, breaking me from my thoughts. "No," I replied. "Who is it?" Before she could answer, the first bell rang, and we made our way to our lockers. I was still uneasy, though I couldn't pinpoint why. It wasn't until we walked into our first class that I realized what was bothering me. "Class, we have a new student joining us today. Her name is Cass, and I expect you to make her feel welcome," our teacher announced. Then the door opened and she walked in. I couldn't breathe. Cass was beautiful. She had deep blue eyes that seemed to pierce through me, short dark hair that framed her face perfectly, and a confident, almost dangerous aura that drew me in immediately. Our eyes locked, and for a moment everything else disappeared. My heart raced and a strange feeling washed over me. A pull, something primal. This was it. The feeling I'd been told about but never truly believed in. I had found my mate. As she took her seat across the room, her eyes flicked back to mine, and I knew in that instant my life was about to change again. This time for the better, or maybe the worse. As Cass settled into her seat across the room, my mind raced. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was drawn to her in a way I'd never felt with anyone else. Something deep and ancient stirred within me, and it both terrified and thrilled me. Sierra nudged me, pulling me out of my daze. "Earth to live? You okay?" I blinked, realizing I'd been staring for way too long. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, and I tried to focus on the lesson. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Cass, her eyes, her presence. It was like gravity itself was pulling me toward her. Class dragged on, every second feeling like an eternity. I kept sneaking glances at Cass, and each time I caught her looking back at me. Her gaze was intense, unflinching. It was unnerving but also exhilarating. When the bell finally rang, I packed up my things, trying to act casual, but my heart was racing. Sierra was already chatting away about weekend plans, but I barely heard her. My entire focus was on Cass, who was now walking toward me, her movements fluid and purposeful. "Hi," she said, her voice smooth like velvet. "I'm Cass. You must be Olivia." Her voice sent a shiver down my spine. "Yeah, but everyone calls me Liv." I managed to reply, my mouth suddenly dry. Sierra jumped in as usual. "I'm Sierra. Welcome to our lovely school. We've got all the usual boring stuff, plus nuns who scare the crap out of everyone." Cass smiled, a slow, almost predatory grin that sent my heart into overdrive. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." There was something about her, something dangerous yet magnetic. I couldn't place it, but I felt it deep in my gut. And it wasn't just the fact that she was breathtakingly beautiful. There was something more, something that made me want to get closer, even though I knew I shouldn't. "So, where do you transfer from?" Sierra asked, clearly as curious as I was, though for different reasons. Cass shrugged, leaning casually against the lockers. "A few places. I've moved around a lot." Her vague answer left more questions than it answered, but Sierra, ever the social butterfly, just nodded and moved on. "Well, you'll love it here. It's boring as hell most of the time, but at least we've got good company, right, Liv?" I laughed, trying to act normal. "Yeah, sure. Good company." Cass's eyes lingered on mine for a second longer than was comfortable, but I couldn't look away. It was like she could see straight through me, like she knew what I was hiding. And maybe she did. There was something in her eyes that told me she wasn't as ordinary as she seemed. After what felt like an eternity, she finally broke the gaze. "Well, I guess I'll see you around, Liv." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind spinning. Sierra watched her go, then turned to me with a knowing smirk. "She's hot, right?" Sierra teased, bumping me with her elbow. I blushed furiously. "Shut up, Sierra." "What?" "It's true. I mean, seriously, I saw the way you two were eyeing each other. You're practically drooling." "I was not," I protested, though my cheeks burned with embarrassment. Sierra just laughed. "Whatever you say, Liv." We headed to our next class, but I couldn't stop thinking about Cass. There was something about her that made my pulse quicken. Something more than just her looks. It was like my entire body was tuned to her presence, like every fiber of my being wanted to be near her. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Every time I saw Cass in the halls, my heart skipped a beat. By the time school let out, I was a mess of nerves and confusion. Sierra had already bolted to meet up with her girlfriend, leaving me to walk home with Elijah. He fell into step beside me, his usual carefree attitude tempered by a glance in my direction. "You okay, Liv?" "Yeah, why?" "You've been weird all day." "Distracted." I sighed. Elijah could always read me too well. "I met someone new." He smirked. "Oh? Someone interesting." I shoved him playfully. "Shut up. It's not like that." But deep down I knew it was exactly like that. Something about Cass had flipped a switch in me, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't. As we neared home, Elijah's expression grew serious. "You felt something, didn't you?" I stopped walking, startled by his question. "What do you mean?" "About her, Cass. There's something different about her, isn't there?" I stared at him, confused. "How do you know?" He glanced around as if checking for anyone who might overhear us. "Because I felt it too. There's something off about her." I swallowed hard. Elijah had always been sensitive to these things, ever since the night of the attack. If he felt something, it meant I wasn't imagining things. Cass wasn't just a beautiful girl who had caught my attention. She was something else, something more. But what? "Do you think she's like me?" I asked quietly, the unspoken words hanging between us. Elijah frowned, thinking. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe something worse." "Worse?" He nodded, his expression grim. "You felt it too, right? That pull. It's strong. Too strong." The thought sent a chill down my spine. I had felt it, the magnetic pull that drew me to Cass like a moth to a flame. But now, with Elijah's words echoing in my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if that pull was dangerous. As we reached the house, I glanced back toward the school, unease settling in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that Cass was more than she appeared. And whether she was friend or foe, I was going to find out. But one thing was clear. I wasn't ready for what came next.